Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to Lead to Gold. This is the podcast devoted to discussing all things growth and wellness. And I am your host, Erin Taylor. And I'm so happy you're here. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in. If this conversation gets to be something that you really enjoy, there are a few things you can do to express that support that would be so appreciated and so helpful in just kind of getting this show growing. So you could, wherever you're listening, rate the podcast, and perhaps even better, you could share it with a friend who you think might learn something from it. If you got a lot out of it, I'm sure somebody in your life might as well. And beyond the podcast, if you don't already know, Lead to Gold is also a blog. So for the time being, I post a podcast every other Monday, and I post a blog post over at leadtogold.com every adjacent Monday. So if you're following along, you are effectively getting something from Lead to Gold from me every single Monday, which I love. And I have been doing this for about 3 years now. The podcast, not quite as long, but it's just something that I've been absolutely loving keeping up with. And I love bringing new stuff to you all. I'm always interested in what you want to hear more about, what you want to chat about. So the final thing that might be useful if you are really enjoying both sides of Lead to Gold is subscribing to emails. And I only send an email out once a month. I try to pack it in with like everything that's new. And if you do that, you do also get an exclusive monthly astrology tied playlist. So the Virgo one just went out a couple weeks ago. If you get signed up before Libra season starts, then guess what? You're going to get a Libra season playlist. And I always try to tie them just to like whatever the vibe is for that time. So if that's something that interests you, you can subscribe to my emails. I promise they're just like fun and cutesy and not spammy. So any and all things. There you go. Overall, I'm just so happy that you're here, and I'm really excited to get into our conversation for today because you guys, this is so relevant in my life right now. I don't know about you, but we're going to just get into all of the little teeny tiny nitty gritty details about being a sensitive person and or somebody who has at any time been shunned or been even disciplined for being too sensitive, using air quotes there. Look, can I just get it out of the way right here, right now at the beginning of the episode? I know that this has been a discourse for quite some time now. I know that a lot of people have tried to kind of unlearn and help other people unlearn the belief that we are too sensitive, that anybody is too sensitive. This directly ties to the work that a lot of men in our society have been starting to do, which is kind of unlearning the toxic masculine traits of never having emotions, never showing emotions, never being able to express in any way other than violence or domination or hiding from the feeling. We are going to get into all of that and more, but I just wanted to point out that this is just the beginning of this conversation, because I know, because I've seen it and I see it a lot, that sensitivity is becoming more accepted. We're already kind of in the middle of that trajectory, but I feel like this is something that goes so deep for so many of us that it's not as simple as just being able to say to somebody, hey, your sensitivity is actually a gift and you are not too sensitive and you should let your emotions out and you should let people see your emotions, You've heard all the things. It's a lot easier said than done. So I'm going to start this episode with a little story time. And I am actually so surprised I've never talked about this before, because it's something that has followed me through almost my entire life. And it's a story that I have held on to as a belief about myself, something that I've tied to very, very, very strongly. And if you just happen to listen to the last episode that was published with Madeline Moon, I just want to make a connection there that we talked a lot about how stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves get in our way so much more often than most of us may realize. This is one of mine, and we'll get into all of it. Anyway, let's start from the beginning. I used to be a very highly sensitive kid, but sensitive not so much in the sense that I would like cry all the time or that I would get my feelings hurt easily. I guess there was some of that in there, but I was just a very expressive kid. I'm sure many of us were, but there comes a time, again, in many of our lives where that pure expression, that unapologetic expression tends to get squashed. So I don't remember what I was talking to my mom about, but I remember very vividly her telling me that I was too sensitive as I was like laying at the foot of her bed upset about something. I'd be willing to bet it was something along the lines of mean girls at school or a couple of my friends who were always fighting with one another and kind of like dragging me into the fights. And that was a very common theme in a lot of my frustrations as a sensitive kid. I was always noticing like the drama going on around me. I was always very, very, very aware of other people's feelings and thoughts. And I wanted to make everybody happy, but also just be a happy person. So anytime that the vibes were off or there was tension or stress or sadness or fear, it was very immediately noticeable to me. And I didn't like it. So I guess I spent a lot of time talking about it. And I don't know what we were talking about, but I do remember that line, Erin, you're too sensitive. And I remember I didn't cry about it, but I kind of like buried my head in the blankets and I was like, I'm not too sensitive. No, I'm not. And then I stopped and I was like, wait, me reacting that way is a very sensitive way of acting. It's a very sensitive reaction. I'm sensitive about the way that she is calling me too sensitive. And that's when it clicked for me that, oh, okay, maybe the way that I react to the things going on around me is too much. Maybe I'm too much. And from there, I wouldn't say that necessarily stopped like at that point. I was probably, 9 or 10 years old. From there, I was a lot more aware, however, of my responses to things. I didn't want to be reactive. I didn't want to be overly expressive. I didn't want people to know that I was upset the moment that I felt upset. There was suddenly the need to hide it a little bit or to put on a mask of some kind to make others around me feel more comfortable. And I'll never forget this one in particular. I was in 7th grade and I remember asking a guy out who I had a huge crush on who was on my bus, and I was going to go over to his house and tell him, but he was busy. So I called him on the phone and told him, and he was so nice about it, but he was just like, hey, I mean, I'm really glad you told me, but I just want to be friends. I hope you understand all the, super nice. The moment that man hung up, the moment that boy hung up, I sobbed, and kind of tried to self-soothe by like eating a bag of Doritos and watching Glee on the couch by myself, just crying. Those two events were several years apart, but I remember thinking about the second one. I'm like, wait, no. We're not going to do this. We're not going to cry about this. We're not going to be upset about this. We are just going to carry on like everything's cool and I am unbothered, and we're not doing any more of this crying shit. By that time I was like 13. So I very vividly remember, because I kept track. I literally kept track like a crazy person. I did not cry at all. Not a single time between the ages of 13 and 17. Like not a single time. And I look back on that now and I'm just like, okay, first off, those are like the formative years of just like crying about everything and anything because you're a literal teenager and the hormones are insane and crazy. But I would not let myself. I taught myself that crying is a sign of weakness. crying shows that you are too sensitive, that you are weak, and nobody wants to see that. And that stuck with me far beyond my teenage years in different ways. Yes, every once in a while I will cry, but not often. It's very, very hard to get to that point unless I am assisted by substances, which we won't get into in this episode. But even if I wanted to, even if I felt the need to so strongly, I still really, really struggle with being able to get to that level of expressive emotion. It's just something that I became painfully aware of once I was an early adult, because I was like, oh my God, this is actually the problem. It's not that I was ever too sensitive. It's that I tried to convince myself that nobody wanted to deal with my sensitivity. Nobody wanted to deal with the emotions that would come out of me had I expressed pain or fear or sadness or anger. That's off limits. That was always off limits. Once I reached adulthood, early adulthood, that's when I started to kind of reclaim this part of myself, or at least attempt to. But by that point, and this is still what I'm struggling with and ultimately why I'm talking about this today, is that I was emotionally stunted. It is still so hard for me to express emotions in an effective way that doesn't actually genuinely drive people away. And I know that there are a lot of people out there like this, because this is, in fact, a symptom of past traumas or learned behaviors. It's a symptom of various mental illnesses like depression and anxiety and BPD, and even things that get a little bit more into intellectual disabilities like ODD, and all sorts of valid reasons why we may feel the need to suppress our emotions to the point where they come out in ways that we don't want them to. So it's clear that many of us are in this boat, which causes us to misdirect our fear, our anger, our pain onto other things in our lives, more specifically onto other people, that ends up harming our relationships, but also harming ourselves way more than simply releasing that emotion and letting it be seen would harm us. I hope that makes sense. And the reason that we do this is because, well, it could be several things. Namely, we can't express it. We don't know how, because we have either conditioned and trained ourselves not to, or we never learned how to in a healthy way. Another reason that we may do this is because we're actually too afraid to even get close to that emotion at all. And there are many, again, reasons why this may be. I don't know that we'll touch every single one of them, but I will do my best to give this a more holistic look and see what can be done when we're in this situation. Start by accepting the following as truth, because I really do strongly believe that it is. This world needs more sensitivity. This world needs more highly sensitive people, not less. Not like we may have grown up thinking, not like we may have grown up being told. And look, if you are just not a sensitive person by nature, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that either. A lot of this is actually inspired by a great podcast episode from The Psychology of Your 20s that came out recently. And she was mentioning how a lot of this comes from your natural temperament, and that is something that you are just born with. And it can't be changed. No matter how hard you try, it can't be changed. So this exact part of the conversation does not apply to everybody. But if you are not a sensitive person, it doesn't necessarily count you out, because there are 1000% people in your life who are highly sensitive people. So anyway, if you were told as a young person that you were too sensitive, please see what you can do about rejecting that notion, because I strongly believe that there is no such thing as being too sensitive. How in the world could that be a bad thing? Other than the fact that, yes, you are going to pick up on other people's negative feelings and negative energy. you are going to be more attuned to all of the scary, horrible, awful things that happen in this world. Obviously, that's not exactly an upside, but when you really get down into that, how could that possibly be a bad thing? If you are more aware of this world's needs, as far as the pain that we suffer, the pain that we inflict on one another without realizing that we're doing so, the larger world issues that have relatively simple solutions that don't revolve around money, which is why they don't happen. There's so many things that we have a more keen sense of knowing how to solve and knowing what can be done about it. That's, to me, a superpower. But we've been taught that being too sensitive is a burden to the people who are directly in our lives. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Maybe our parents just needed some quiet time. Maybe they just wanted to be alone and they said the wrong thing. But please know, first and foremost, as we continue on in this conversation, that if you are a sensitive person, if you feel things deeply, if you notice things that you think others don't, that is a gift. I could really go on about all of the different things that qualify being a sensitive person as being a gifted person. But I think, like I said earlier, a lot of that at this point might kind of sound like a cliche. The bottom line is, I believe, and I do think that it is a common belief, that highly sensitive people, even if that's not something that you have been diagnosed as, which, by the way, there is a test for it. I will link a very brief, easy one in the show notes if you're interested in finding out. Anyway, being a highly sensitive person, simply put, just means that you are more attuned to your world. You are more able to pick up on the vibes and the emotions and the sensations around you. Therefore, you tend to have a stronger sense of what that room needs, what those people around you need. You are more attuned to work from a standpoint of kindness and comfort because you know that that is a thing that people universally need more of. And oh my God, do we need more of it at this moment in time in our lives, in the world around us? You are likely to have a better radar for this because, I guess, the downside of being a highly sensitive person is that you are a lot more easily overwhelmed by the sensations and the energies around you. You are quicker to notice these things, therefore you are quicker to be upset or agitated or irritable as a result of them. So you know what it means and you know what it looks like to provide a comforting situation. Maybe there are some nuances in there depending on the person, but generally you know how to self-soothe, or you have a little bit more expertise in having to do that for yourself, so you would know how to provide it for others. So that's a good thing. It's an overwhelming thing, and it becomes even more overwhelming if you were made to believe by somebody or your environment as a younger person that you were too dramatic, or your emotions, your outbursts, your reactivities were burdensome. So if that was the case, then you are less likely to be able to share that fullness of your knowledge. You're less likely to be able to do something about the issues that you see in the environments around you. The things that you pick up on, you might be worried that you don't actually know what you're talking about or what you're feeling, that maybe, again, you're just being too sensitive or too overly dramatic or worried. And that sensation has been so kicked into so many of our heads for so long that it's almost impossible, it feels, to get out of it. Just because it feels that way, just because it feels like you do have to hide that part of yourself to an extent, doesn't mean that that part of you just goes away. It doesn't. You are still at your core. I am still at my core a highly sensitive person. So where does that energy go when we can't use it the way that it was meant to be used? Well, if we are new to this And this is becoming something that we are noticing as an issue, as in, okay, I feel things really deeply and it gets to me. Like the world gets to me a lot. And I feel burnt out and I feel stressed and I feel scared. And I'm just frozen in space because I don't know what to do. Or the emotions are getting so overwhelming that I literally just feel like I'm going to explode on somebody if I'm not careful. That's where oftentimes this ends up if we don't have healthy coping mechanisms for it. So we're going to talk about all of the things, but the first thing I want to talk about is just where that might be an inner conversation that we need to have with ourselves. And to be entirely honest with you, it's where I find myself from time to time. It's where I am right now. It's where I always come back to when I realize that I've like lashed out at somebody or I've reacted in a really poor way because I was overstimulated and fearful and I didn't know what to do about it. So, self-sabotage. I've had an episode about it. I'll link it in the show notes if you want more there, just in terms of what that actually looks like and how to overcome that specifically. But this can manifest in feeling all of the feels because you are trying to avoid feeling all of the feels and you just don't know what to do. So self-sabotaging behaviors are those that are going to temporarily help us numb out. They're going to help us get away from the pain or the fear or the anger or the sadness. Most common self-sabotaging behaviors are things like drinking or smoking weed or overeating or doom scrolling or playing video games. It's just like pretty much anything that you do in excess to avoid feeling your feelings. And a lot of highly sensitive people will find themselves utilizing self-sabotaging behaviors because the world is just so overwhelming. I'll use a personal example that I picked up on literally last night. I watched this really heartbreaking video about the Havasupai people who live right around the Grand Canyon. And they are currently, but silently, facing yet another sort of like mining mission. It's a uranium mine that is essentially illegally mining on their property. And even after all of the regulations that have been put into place to ensure that Indigenous people have a home, this is still going on because there are clauses and there are laws from the literal 19th century that allow things like this to still happen. And it's all for the sake of money. That is a perfect example of something that would really, really get to me as a highly sensitive person. And watching that video, I was just shattered, like completely shattered. And what did I do the rest of the night? I numbed out on my phone because I just like couldn't handle it. Another thing that so often happens for so many of us when we're in a state like this and we just don't maybe have the resources or we don't have the time or we don't know what to do with the pain is that we either push away from loved ones or we lash out at them. And yet again, that was something that I did just last night. I was so distraught by this video that afterwards I was just like in a terrible mood. And I didn't have the awareness at the moment to do something about it, do something healthy with that fear and that pain. And instead, I was pretty mean to my partner and just like went to bed in a shitty mood and wasn't very nice. And like, that's something that has happened time and time again in my life and in many people's lives. When we're not careful, when we aren't aware and present with the emotions that come up for us and the overwhelm that comes up from being sensitive, we redirect that energy outward because it has to go somewhere eventually. And it's going to come out in very sharp, very harsh, very cold ways and in ways that just do not feel good to the people around us. So we're going to seem irritable at best and just like a complete bitch at worst. Like it's just not a vibe that anybody wants to be around. And sometimes we can't control that. Sometimes we don't have the wherewithal in the moment to do something healthy with that, and therefore it rubs off a completely wrong way, in a completely misdirected way, to the people that we love, and that drives a wedge in our relationships. So effectively, not feeling your feelings, not expressing your sensitivities makes things worse. It's a system that we have put ourselves in culturally that we just can't win, because if we hold on so strongly to the belief that we are too sensitive, that we need to man up, suck it up, whatever, all of the various cliches that you've heard in your time, then all of that sucking it up like a sponge, like the little sensitive sponges that we are, it's going to leak out onto somebody that we love, somebody who doesn't deserve that, somebody who just wanted to be there for you, and you're going to feel bad immediately. You're going to know what's happening, but you're not going to have the language to do anything about it. So let's talk then about what we can do instead when we are aware, when we are conscious, when we know that this is something that we are dealing with. How can we best manipulate that oversensitivity and that welling up emotion in a way that's going to benefit us and the people around us? By the way, I just want to say that I don't think these suggestions are in any way a substitution for being a highly sensitive person and embracing that. In fact, they're actually ways that you can allow yourself to bring in more if that's what you want, and know how to actually alchemize it into something meaningful. So the very first thing is knowing that the people who really love and value you are going to want to be there for you. They're going to want to hear all of the things that you have on your mind. They want to be the person that is going to help you feel better. They want to be the listening ear, the shoulder to cry on. They don't care that you cry if you're a person who tends to cry a lot. Like, again, if they love you, if they value you, they will stick around. And it may take some time to find who those people really are. But I would be willing to bet, because I'm the same way, that there are people in your life right now who you look at as, okay, I don't want to put this on them. They don't deserve this. They don't need to be burdened by all of my feelings and all of my thoughts and all of my worries. Now, that is not to say that they can be the dumping ground for all of those things, but it is to say that there are almost certainly people in your life who you are thinking that way about, who truly would be like, no, please, actually, please give it to me. I want to be there for you. I want to be a good friend to you. I want to be a good partner to you. I want to hear the things that are on your mind, and I want to hold you in them. So evaluate that, because again, that is something that I do all the time for people that I know want to be there. I am the one who is afraid of bringing it to them because I don't want to face the rejection, and I'm afraid that I will. So evaluate that. See if there are any people or places in your life where that is the overarching feeling. And maybe it's just going to be an opportunity to be brave. Maybe the next time a really big emotion comes up and they're around, you can just say, hey, I am so sorry if I am seeming a little bit off, but here's what's on my mind. And then the next time, you probably won't even feel the need to say sorry for it, because you're going to know that they really, truly want to know. And they don't think you're a burden, and they don't think you're overly dramatic. It's just whoever said that in the past that is still hanging around in the bodies of all of these people that you now know. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So that's the first thing, is finding the people who really will support you and knowing, trusting that they will continue to do so. Again, there's some nuance here, because it's not like we want to take all of our worries and all of our thoughts and word vomit all over all of our loved ones all the time. That would be a lot, but they are the trusted loved ones in your life for a reason. Know that you can confide in them if you need to. Beyond that, and these are kind of getting into some more, maybe more advanced practices of like embodiment and getting into the emotion. Something that I spoke a lot with Madeline about in our most recent episode was somatic expression. So another little reminder there, and if you didn't hear that episode, somatic expression or somatic work is all about feeling in your body. So the way that she describes it, which I'll repeat here because I just think it's the best distinction that you can make, is that when we talk about like feeling our feelings, that does not mean you are going through them in your mind over and over. It doesn't mean thinking through your feelings. It means feeling where they are in your body. You can do this a number of ways. Meditation. There are so many free meditations out there. You could look them up on YouTube or on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. Like, there are so many meditations that you can access for free that will help you to locate the parts of your body that are uncomfortable or that are holding some like tension, holding pain. Oftentimes when you can bring your attention to that place and stay there with it, yeah, it's uncomfortable as shit, and I'm still really bad at it. Like, believe me, this is something that I've practiced and tried to do and get better at for years now, and I'm still so bad at staying with the discomfort. Horrible. But I think it's a really important part of this process. If we can train ourselves to stay there long enough, and there are different guidelines and sort of, I guess, directions in these different meditations, depending on the ones that you choose to do. But the general idea is that you stay there, you feel it, you kind of like send loving thoughts and energy toward that part of you that is in pain or in discomfort. And then eventually you feel it start to dissipate. And that is a way to literally calm your nervous system. For people who are overly sensitive, for people, and I don't want to say overly, you know what I mean, for people who are highly sensitive, I'll just stick with that. People who feel a lot, this is something that tends to work really well. This is something that if we get practiced in it and if we do it regularly, it is an excellent way to discard the emotions and feelings that we don't need anymore. I don't want to get too much into like empath territory because I know that that's become a little bit of a red flaggy word for some people. But when we describe and talk about people who are empathetic or people who are just, again, like highly sensitive to other people's emotions, oftentimes we find ourselves getting stuck with emotions that aren't even ours. Like we've just picked them up from people who are around us. I'm a school teacher, so this is something that happens to me probably a lot more often than I'm even aware of, but I mean, it makes complete sense. If you're a highly sensitive person and you are responsible for 120 teenagers over the span of 2 days, I say 2 days because it's like an A-B schedule. Yeah, that's a lot of insane hormonal energy that I am picking up and then having to live with and or discard at some point. I don't know that I've mastered that skill yet, but another thing that this may not apply to everybody. If you know anything about human design, I am also a reflector, which is the one that is most attuned to the world around them. It is essentially very similar to what we would know as an empathic person. But I won't get into all of that today. It's just all to say that like this is something that is very, very, very commonplace in my life. And it is something that when I'm in the middle of the semester or in the middle of a quarter and shit's hitting the fan and grades are bad and like the kids are burnout and I'm burnout and I'm just like done. Trust me, there are so many days where I have come home and I'm like, okay, look, I need an hour by myself. I need to expel all of this energy in every single possible way that I can think to expel it. And usually, especially in the winter, that's going to come in the form of like a scalding hot shower. And as I'm in the shower, I am just envisioning like all of that energy coming off of my body and being washed away. And that's great. That's like honestly such a huge help, especially when we can be there and visualizing it as all of that energy actually running off the body and not just taking a shower absentmindedly. You know what I mean? So I don't really know where I was going with that, but that in and of itself is a way to kind of meditate and get clear on where we are experiencing discomfort and where we can let it go in a safe, healthy way that doesn't run off onto other people that we love. Oh, somatic expression. I think I was getting in on this a little bit and then I went off in another direction. Somatic expression is feeling that feeling, embodying that feeling. So earlier today, this morning, after I had just a bad reaction to that horrible, sad video last night, I woke up this morning and was just like, God, I handled that poorly. Honestly, really poorly. And I journaled about it. And the word that kept coming up was helpless. And I realized, I'm like, that's the core pain that I'm feeling right now. I feel helpless. I feel like no matter what I do, no matter what I talk about, no matter how many community members I can reach out to, I am helpless to being able to do anything about the Havasupai people or Palestine or Sudan or Congo or the environmental crisis or any and all of the insane, sad, horrible shit that is going on in our world right now. I feel helpless to it. Yet again, I've had an episode where I've talked about like the discerning between grief and guilt, I think was the main point. Grief is necessary. Grief is so necessary. Guilt, not so much, because if we stay in guilt, if we continue to wallow in that, if we continue to feel bad about all of the things that we can't control, then we won't be able to do anything because we're just going to be completely disembodied and shut off and burnt out. And then we have no strength to actually continue on in the fight. I say that to say, helpless, guilt, similar feelings. I found myself there, and still in that moment, it's like, okay, I know that this is something that I think and believe strongly. I know that this is something that I have talked extensively about to, the outer world. That's part of my work. But yet I'm still here. So what can I do? In the mind of a somatic practitioner, which I am not, but it is something that I'm very interested in, I might create a character. I might envision what the most helpless thing on earth is. Maybe it's like a little baby deer who was born 6 hours ago and now mom has gone off to find food. Maybe I envision the time in life that I felt the absolute most helpless that I've ever felt. Whatever it is, you envision it, you create it, you become it. And then part of the somatic experience is living that out for a temporary time. Could be 5 minutes, could be an hour. But you become that helpless caricature. You become whatever it is that you are currently feeling that you maybe don't want to feel. That's the scariest part, right? Is that it's like you don't want to feel helpless. You don't want to feel angry. You don't want to feel depressed. But if you want to help yourself move through it, then you have to literally like move with it to move through it. I don't know if that's making complete sense, but again, I'm not a somatic practitioner. If you want a little bit more expertise on that, I would suggest going and listening to the episode that I did with Madeline. But anyway, haven't done it yet. It's something that I want to try because I know that if I really were to get into that character, then I can understand it better. And then I can move on from it. And that is all, in essence, what the purpose of expressing somatically is for. If you want to take it one step further, again, this is something that Madeline talks about a lot, is bringing that to a partner, bringing that to a trusted audience, bringing that to a place where you know that you're not going to be judged and instead you're going to be held in it. That serves two purposes. One, other people are witnessing you, so you feel even more responsible for like bringing it. And 2, those people are holding you, or that person is holding you, and they are showing you, hey, I'm still here. Like, you're doing all of this and you're showing me all of this, and I see your pain, and I'm still here. Because you're not overly sensitive. You're not too much. You're not too dramatic. And you're not helpless. You might be embodying the helplessness right now, but you are not that thing. That's powerful. That's extremely powerful. And I think the more that we can get ourselves into this work, whether it is in front of an audience or a person or not, whether we talk to somebody else about this or not, the more that we can get ourselves involved in our own emotional goings on, the better we will be able to react to situations that happen to us. And the better that we will be able to, I don't want to say deal with those emotions, but like put them where they belong. Being a sensitive person means that you feel more than the average person. And that's a lot. It's hard to deal with. It's hard to overcome. It's hard to know where that goes in your life. In this life where we have been trained for so long to not respond to our emotional bodies and to not have a relationship with them, because money is more important. Productivity is more important. Getting out of bed in the morning and going to work is more important than what you feel. Emotional intelligence is not something that has been widely spoken of until really like the last decade, maybe the last 15 years. We have no language for emotional intelligence next to the things that actual psychologists are studying and talking about. And I hope to God that one day that will become more commonplace. But for right now, it feels to most of us like it's just kind of a weird space on the internet that like the wellness girlies are talking about. I know that there's more to sensitivity than just that emotional aspect, but it does manifest itself in an emotional way for the most part. When we're physically sensitive to things, when our actual senses are easily overwhelmed, there are similar reactive responses that we give off. So to me, all of this comes back to the emotional body. It's something that we do really, really owe ourselves to relearning. And again, that in and of itself is really hard if you grew up believing that that was not something that you should be doing or focusing on. If you grew up hearing that you're too dramatic and you need to tone it down and you're too much and stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about. Again, a cliche. Lots of cliches in this episode, but I think a lot of us have been there. And a lot of us have learned to turn it off. But even though it's off, it didn't go away. It's still there. How is that working out for us? Not well? Well, hopefully some of the stuff we talked about in this episode can serve as a way to integrate again and find a healthy balance. Maybe find a good coping mechanism for yourself, something that works into the life that you live currently, a way to communicate about it with the people around you. And I've got so many resources for this in the show notes for you. So if you want to explore further with people who are actually studying this, people who actually actively work in this every day, besides, I love talking about stuff, but at the end of the day, it's just something that I'm experiencing. I'm not an expert in psychology or in the body or anything like that. So if you want some more concrete information on this, I've got a few resources down below for you. And I just want to thank you so much for being here. I feel like part of why I do this is because talking about it just helps me parse through what needs to be done. And now that I can move on from like last night, for example, I have a better sense of, okay, these are some things that I can try, and these are some things that I need to commit to in order to move on and do better next time. And I hope that even if just one person hears this and has an action plan from here on out, that's all I need. That's like truly, that's why I do this. So thanks again for being here. And let's finish up today's episode with a little game from We're Not Really Strangers. I explain this every single episode and I don't know if I need to, but if you want to journal along, this is a card from the healing expansion pack of the game We're Not Really Strangers. It might be random. It might be completely, totally related to what we just talked about. I don't know because I haven't pulled the card yet. But if you want to journal along, this is a great opportunity to just sit with something going on in your life. We'll talk about it together. And then, if you want to let me know how you feel about this or any part of this episode, feel free to reach out to me. You can email me. You can DM me on Instagram. Again, all the links for all the things are in the show notes. But let's get to this question. See what we got for today. Ooh, okay. Let's talk. This one gets deep. So maybe slight trigger warning on this one about mental health scares. So if that's something that doesn't interest you, I'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you for listening. If you want to get into it, let's get into it. So the question asks, when was the first mental health scare you remember having, and what stands out to you about it? Man, a mental health scare, I think, is a little subjective. I think the very first time that I thought something might be off wasn't so much a scare, but the first time I thought something might be off was, this is actually so funny to some of you, I'm sure. I was reading the Twilight series and I was in 7th grade. And I got to New Moon, to the part where Bella is like, I guess Edward just left her. It's been so long. But Edward left her. She like sits in front of her window for like 6 months or something. And I just remember the pages going like October, November, December, January, I don't remember if that's exactly what it was, but hopefully you know what I'm talking about if you've read the series. Anyway, it was very clear and very well written out that she was like extremely depressed. And as I read the book, I kind of was like feeling that myself. And I was like, wait, what is this? This is weird. Is this what depression is? I don't know. And I think there were just kind of a lot of little signs and signals at that part of my life that definitely would have indicated that I was a little bit depressed. Like I definitely was not excited for things the way that I once was. I didn't want to go to school. I was like dressing in the same clothes pretty much every single day. I didn't have very good hygiene, all of those things. So that's the first kind of like off moment that I remember. I wouldn't say scare so much, just because in all honesty, if you've been here, you know that I have a full episode on that too. And I don't really want to repeat all of that in this little tiny moment. But how about you? What stands out to you about it? I think for me, if I didn't already answer that, the funny thing is just that it's like I read a book and was like, oh, that's what that is. And I find that really interesting now as an English teacher, because that happens so frequently. And it's honestly amazing to me in a good way that there are so many things that we just wouldn't necessarily be aware of until we read about somebody else experiencing it. And then we're like, oh, wait, I know what that is. That happened to me. It's just great. It's just like one of my favorite things about my job is that I love when that happens and kids talk to me about it. It's the coolest thing ever. So ending that kind of morbid question on a very high note. It's like one of my favorite things ever. So that's that. How about you? Let me know if you have any other thoughts about sensitivity or being a highly sensitive person, or any like gaps or questions or things that I missed. Let's talk about it. Please DM me. Please reach out to me. I always love hearing from you all. And I am just so, so grateful to have this little community as Led to Gold. So thank you. I also just want to quickly mention too that I will be putting the podcast on a pretty significant hiatus starting in November. So you're getting a couple more episodes out of me and one more guest at least that I'm really excited about. But in the meantime, just know that I will still be around. It just won't be on this platform for the time being. So I'm here. I'm here if you need me. Thanks so much. Love you so much. And I will chat with you very, very soon. Bye.